What is up, guys? Teddy Cornwell here. Welcome to the Underdog Talk, the most underrated podcast on earth, and there is something about the Underdog. But, ladies and gentlemen, to my right, we have one of the greatest coaches of all time on the Underdog Talk. I mean, the legend himself, the technician, Mr. Chris Aceto. What is up, sir? How you doing today, man?
Well, Teddy, if we're going to continue, you have to call me the greatest. I'm just kidding. Michael Jackson liked to be called the king of pop. So just kidding. Yeah, I made room for your. I know it's the underground or underdog.
So we're actually the Underdog. So
Underdog podcast. I had
Yes,
to
sir.
cancel. I had to cancel a meeting for this. So we'll knock it out. No, I was gonna say I had to cancel. I was just Howard Stern for this. So because you're more important than Howard. Of course, I'm kidding.
I was getting really excited in my mind, and for that, I was going to call you the greatest of all time. I mean, in my mind, I think you are, but I don't want to start the controversy, so we'll say one of the greatest. But Chris, between me and you, the greatest. Now, I want to take it way back, actually, to your Springfield College days. I know that must feel like a long time ago, Chris, and you're a graduate who holds a degree in applied exercise science. Now, why decide to go down the exercise path? And during college, what was that job you wanted to pursue after college with that degree?
Well, I didn't want. I just wanted to be a bodybuilder. So my parents said you have to go to college. So obviously, there's no bodybuilding major, and my two interests, were really bodybuilding and bodybuilding. So Jeff King went to Springfield College, and at the time, Jeff was the best bodybuilder in the world for sure, 1983. And so I thought, okay, if it's good enough for Jeff, it's good enough for me. So that's how I ended up at Springfield. Ironically, Jose Raymond was on campus at that time because his brother was there, and Jose used to go stay at the weekend, stay with him in the dorm on the weekends. But I was like the king of introverts. So, our paths never cross. And ironically, I'd end up years and years later coaching Jose.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like he was the party animal in college and you were actually working and trying to get the degree, Chris. Now, obviously, would you mind talking about how big of an influence this degree has been on your coaching and how it's contributed to your successful coaching?
I mean, it gave me some framework for basic understanding of nutrition, really, and exercise physiology. But I don't think that you need a college degree to be a bodybuilding coach, just like I don't think you need a business degree to be a businessman. So, I have, it's right over there. I've never hung it up, but I have an award that I received for #1 graduating senior, male senior. I got an academic award, so I did really well because I applied myself. But people always ask, or they'll say like, well, Chris has a background or Chris has a degree, and I think it's helpful. But there's a lot of other great coaches, who have no degrees whatsoever. And there's just as, like I said, there's people in business who never went to, school, have no formal training in business, but they excel in it.
Yeah, and I mean, I got a degree and I don't even use my degree, so I guess I'm a perfect example of that as well, Chris. Now, I don't know if many people know, but before coaching, before being a bodybuilder, you were a writer for Muscle and Fitness. And the interesting fact is the legendary Joe Wieder called you personally. I mean, what was that like having the godfather of bodybuilding call you personally?
I mean, looking back, it's crazy because I was young, and but I wrote from him I did articles for him, so far back that I used a typewriter. That's how because very few people had computers. It was like 80, maybe it was like 88 or something, 1988. and I put together an article and I wrote it by hand. And then after I wrote it by hand, I typed it out on I think like an electric typewriter. So instead of banging the keys, it was electrified. So when you barely touch the key, people might not even know what typewriters are. And then I think somebody came down to Gold's where I worked and in Venice, and they got the article, and I was stunned that Joe was like, "Oh, we're going to buy you a computer. We'll buy you a computer if you continue to write articles." So he may have bought me a computer, or I think maybe Gold's Venice. I got to use Ed Connors bought me a computer. I had a computer after that, so and had the crazy printer. Had like this. God, it would take forever to print stuff out, but it was looking back, it was amazing that our paths got to cross. Me and Jose's didn't cross in Springfield yet. I was out in California. Me and Joe's crossed like right from the get-go.
And honestly, Chris, I thought you were like 25 years old. I honestly had no clue you were that old, that you were using typewriters, sir. To be perfectly honest, I don't even think I've ever touched a typewriter. Now, obviously you were one of the most successful writers in the bodybuilding industry, but I'm going to say it because I don't know if you're allowed to say it, but you are the greatest bodybuilding coach of all time. Now, I want to look at how you started. So how did you actually start getting into coaching, and who was your first client?
I coached when I was at Springfield. Somebody hooked me up with Paul DeMeo, who was, I think, 19 at the time. And, Paul was like, kind of like, the expectation was that he would go and be a, top finisher at the Olympia. And that was, I don't even know when that was, 87. And then after I got my degree, I moved during my college years in the summers. That's how I met Joe originally. I got hired by Joe Wieder. Had a bodybuilding camp in the summer out in California, and it was like Joe would like put the ads in the magazines and have all the superstars like headline this camp where people would come from all over the really world and come stay at this college campus in Los Angeles. And each week Joe would feature like Lee Haney, and then the next week Rich Gaspari, then the next week so and so. And my job was to be like a quote camp counselor. And they had a formal education program there in nutrition, which was really good program. It was taught by Tom Dieters, who would go on to be the editor for Muscle and Fitness. And so I was out there in the summertime, and what I realized is that I had a really good grasp of bodybuilding at a really young age. When I was like 20. And then once I graduated, I started working at Gold's Venice with as providing like diet plans for just like regular people who were in Gold's Venice at the time. And Ed Connors, who was the owner of Gold's Gym, would send bodybuilders my way, and he would essentially, he wouldn't pay me to do diets for people, but he'd give me free rent in Gold's Venice. And which is, looking back, that's insane that I had an office for free in Gold's Venice. And at the time, Gold's had like at least 10,000 members. So I would have if you go into Gold's Gym Venice at that time, I had a little sign there. The first thing you do, you come in, you see a sign, Chris Aceto, diet consults. And so in exchange for that, Ed would send bodybuilders my way. So I started prepping people out in California, and that was like a whole completely foreign idea. Nobody was prepping anyone. There was no such thing as, oh, I'm prepping someone. So no one did it. So I would work with bodybuilders who were getting ready for shows out there, and there was no internet or anything like that. So people, like, quote, in the know would know that I was working with them. I mean, it's not like today you can post a picture of, Andrew Jack on my Instagram and everyone knows that I'm, working with Andrew Jack. It was just like I'd be working with Chris Cormier, and, maybe Chris and his brother would know, or, Flex Wheeler, who was his competition, may know.
And I mean, people certainly do know one particular gentleman you coached, the legendary bodybuilder Jay Cutler, and you were in his corner at the age of 18. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Jay, we were just talking about this at the Arnold. I told Jay, I said, I know exactly where I was in my condo in Maine when you called me. I know what my phone looked like. I know what my desk looked like. Because one of the things I asked him is, how'd you get my number? And he called me, I think Lou Zwick, who used to produce this show called American Muscle on ESPN, which I mean,
Yes.
was amazing because he had a bodybuilding show on ESPN, which doesn't happen anymore. Uh, Lou gave him my number, and Jay called me, and I went down to see him in Worcester, Mass. I think he was 18. Yeah, 18. And I went to the gym with him, put together a diet program. And he just told my son recently, he said for 6 months, he followed that diet program to a T, not even like one meat. There was no deviations whatsoever. And I went to see him after 6 months. And like, I was astounded, like the changes he made in 6 months was ridiculous. And I probably went to see him before the 6 months was up, or he maybe came up to see me. And so, he began this journey to, win the Olympia, which was, started at 18. And you can ask him if you ever have him on, I put it in his head early. We're going all the way.
And I mean, all the way he did as a four-time Mr. O with you. Now I have to ask, when you started coaching him, did you see the greatness that would follow? I mean, was
Yeah,
that something?
like I said, after 6 months, as a teenager, I put it into his head, Olympia, and people have losses. Like he didn't even win the T Nationals. He won his class. He didn't even win the Nationals. He won, his class. And when he turned pro, I was still like, oh, we're winning the Olympia. People were like, what are you talking about? And, people thought he was going to be a second tier pro, which is so odd because like I could see it and people in his circle could see it. But other people, competitors, and, those days you had like a big magazine presence. So, quote, writers and editors, nobody thought Jay was going to like parlay himself into something special. I mean, I think he knew it, I knew it, and I think that's all who needs to know. But that's all. That's enough. For the athlete to know, and someone supporting him know.
That is enough. I think it's a relationship that is endeared and special beyond belief. Now, obviously, what approach do you take when you're working with your athletes that makes you different from other coaches and other prep coaches?
I don't I keep folders on people. I'll give you an example. Like I keep like big folders on people. This is like a diet for someone. And then after the contest, I just burn it. Literally, I throw it out or shred it. And because, to answer your question more directly is I take a approach that everyone's different. And what one works for one person may not work for another. And then what works for you this year may not work, next year. And that causes a lot of frustration with some people I coach because they're like, they'll reference back to, last year we did this and now you're doing this and you're dieting me harder. And I mean, I say, well, that's the way it is. But the point is that, people are different and your body's different, you don't have the same body at 32 as you do at 22. And sometimes you don't have the same metabolism you have at 23 as you did just last year. So I try to make everything unique, and it's based on no set formula, no set preconceived notions of what's going to happen. I just try to deal with what's happening now, not what's worked in the past. Kind of like in the stock market, they say past performance does not predict future performance. It's 100% the same with the body. Just because something worked in the past doesn't mean it'll work in the future. So I think to me, that's what's unique, and I think. And then whenever I'm helping someone, prepping someone for a contest, I will, always try to remind myself, don't get trapped into, preconceived ideas. If somebody just has to diet really, really, really hard, That's what it is. And sometimes people do and sometimes people don't. I've dieted people on just easy diets and they get shredded, and other people or the same person, pretty hard diet, a couple of years later.
And I saw that you had a 3-step plan as well in terms of introducing that into your coaching that I was reading about. That's 3-step plan you still use, right, Chris?
What's that?
You had a 3-step goal or a 3-step mindset in your coaching. I forgot. I think it was an old article you were talking about. You had a 3-step.
Oh my God, I wrote 1,000 articles over time.
Yeah, that's probably not a good
muscle development and.
Yeah, it's probably not a good.
All the places that are out of business now.
Damn it, Chris, you drove them out of business. Now I'm playing. Now, obviously, we had George Farah on the podcast, and he was talking about how he's kind of stepping away from bodybuilding and that you are now working with Andrew Jacked. And I mean, we had Andrew Jacked on the podcast and a great guy. But to me, what I was really impressed with was the change from the Mr. O to the Arnold. I mean, the shreddiness, the condition. What is it like working with Andrew Jacked, who many consider kind of the future of bodybuilding?
He's easy to work with. One of the top, for sure, one of the top 3 to 5, maybe top 3 easiest people to work with. So it's easy to work with people who just, follow directions and report back. I mean, I had 0 conversations with him for the prep, none. So that just means I told him, this is what I think you should be doing, and I'd email it to him, and then that's what he would do. I mean, we didn't discuss the diet one bit, nothing, and he didn't ask me anything at all. I once worked with. I worked for years and years with Eduardo Correa in the 212, and I mean, he could have he was as high as second at the Olympia, and he had multiple thirds and could have easily won at least 1, if not 3 or 4 Olympias. He once told me when I came into his hotel room, he said, "Have I ever asked you a question?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Have I ever asked you anything about my prep?" And I said, "I don't think so." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because he was prepping someone and they have a million questions." And it was just his way to make a statement that he's frustrated working with this person who's got 10,000 questions, and all those years, Eduardo never really asked me anything.
And I think having that trust in a coach is key. And I honestly laughed because I remember I did my first bodybuilding show, and I think I texted my coach a million times, "Hey, coach, can I drink water the day of the show? Hey, coach. And
well, you can't be an NFL coach, offensive coach, let's say, calls the play, or the head coach calls the play. You don't have the quarterback or the offensive line saying, "Just check back with him, see if he's sure."
Putting in perspective, that does make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, I have to ask, what were your thoughts on the placings of the Arnold? Obviously, Andrew got 3, but many say it could have gone either way between the top 3.
It could have easily gone top 3. I had Andrew winning in prejudge, and I didn't have him winning the night show. I think it was about. Well, I think it was somewhat the same. I just thought that Samson got radically better between prejudge and finals, and Nick also got a lot better for the finals. But it is what it is. Andrew got 3rd, and I think those 2 will have a tough time getting by him at the Olympia. And I think Andrew's extremely dangerous. If people don't take him seriously, it doesn't matter if they do or don't. He'll be a serious threat to win. So the show's a long way away, and you saw the changes he was able to make from the Olympia to the Arnold. It's
drastic,
radical.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have the best coach in the world, I mean, that's what you expect. And obviously, he's working with you and Psycho. So I mean, you got a great team there, and ending this podcast, Chris, you are seen it all in the bodybuilding world as a coach, as an athlete, as a nutrition expert. So what is your biggest tip for someone who is looking to become a bodybuilder? And then your biggest tip for someone who is looking to become a professional bodybuilder?
Um, One, be realistic, because very few people, in terms of becoming a professional bodybuilder, you know, a big piece of that is you have to have really, really good genetics. But you don't need the best genetics, that's for sure. You know, uh, you have to be able to work a lot harder than you think you can work. And hard work is like perspective. I mean, I tell people, if they shadowed me in a day and tried to do what I do in a day, they'd probably have a heart attack within a month, because just too many hours, too much going on all the time. It's a lot of hard work. I'm not saying I'm like the hardest worker in the room, but it's perspective. A lot of times people tell me in bodybuilding I work hard, and then I say, well, okay, good. Go train with so and so, and they say, God, that almost, those workouts almost killed me. And so you have to be a hard worker. And outside of having great, good genetics, really good genetics, you have to be a really hard worker, and you have to be really patient, because most people in bodybuilding end up losers. You always lose more shows than you win, for most people. I think Dexter has the most wins. He has lots and lots. He has more losses than wins. So if he defined himself based on his losses, you know, uh, especially early on, he wasn't winning pro shows when he started out. He could have quit. He could have gave up. He was struggling, not struggling, but he wasn't winning qualifications to become a pro. So, and he went on to win the Olympia. So, you have to be really patient. I mean, uh, at any level, and building a a great physique takes a long time. I know that people this day and age, I mean, there are before and afters of people who are pros now. It was like 3 years ago. There are exceptions to the rules, but you have to be a hard worker. You have to be patient. You have to, know how to train. You have to know how to eat to get big. You have to know how to eat to get big without getting too fat. You have to know how to diet, to be able to get ripped without losing your mass. So there's a lot of components to it. And, there's no single easy answer, right? It's just like saying, like, how to become, successful businessman. Oh my gosh, there's so many moving parts to it. So, but if you can, hook up with, a bodybuilder, if you're just starting bodybuilding, if you can hook up with someone in the gym who, has competed before, at a minimum, if you can train with that person, you can, learn by doing. You can, mirror what they're doing in the gym, follow them, and that's a good start, as opposed to just, there's a difference between training with someone who's bigger than you, stronger than you, more developed than you, more experienced than you, than rather just like reading about it on the internet. Like, this is how to train. I mean, you can watch a million videos. Uh, you can watch videos up the yin yang, on ice skating, but until you get on that slippery ice with ice skates, it means nothing.
And Dexter Jackson did become the winningest bodybuilder of all time. So, I mean, I think that means something. Rome wasn't built in a night. And I just got to pop up a picture here. Woo! Chris, you are a aesthetic man, sir. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest bodybuilding coach of all time. Now, before we go, the floor is yours, sir. Where can we find that social media? Anything you want to promote? The floor is yours, sir.
You can. I don't have much to promote, because I'm
Are
not
you
selling
open
much,
for
because
coaching?
I'm in the sport because I enjoy it. But you can go to, I think my Instagram. You can find it, Chris Aceto. It comes out to, I think it's The Real Technician, I
Yes.
believe.
Yes.
And you just see, like, I post updates there. People I'm helping, essentially.
Are you open to coaching for people? Is that something that you're doing, or are you locked in?
A little bit, a little bit. I don't take too many people, but yeah, I'm not really taking clients, more or less. I just, I'm in it at this point just to, stay in it. It's funny that George said he's stepping away. I've been contemplating that for years, but I keep getting sucked into like the Andrew Jacks or, just some people I can't because I've kind of been helping them for 5 or 6 years, and they're at the Olympia now. And, I mean, I've been helping, let's say, Rafael Brandeo since 2018, we're 5 years in. So, when he was 10th at his first Olympia. So it's hard to say like, oh, I'm not doing it anymore.
Well, from the bottom of all our hearts in the bodybuilding community, thank you for all you have done, sir. I mean, I think you need a pat on your back. I mean, you've changed the sport for the better. And I mean, your name is now implemented and ingrained in bodybuilding, sir, as the greatest coach of all time. So thank you, Chris, from the bottom of my heart as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please go check out Chris's Instagram. I mean, you can see who he's working with, what he's up to, and just into the mind of the greatest bodybuilding coach of all time. I know I've said that a million times, but I just can't stop saying it. Chris, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast, sir. I truly appreciate it. It's one of the biggest honors and privileges of my life. So thank you, sir. Guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this YouTube video. Until next time, guys, Underdog out.